Today's podcast is short, sweet, to the point, with a reminder from somebody really smart with a how to protect your needle movers, get your not to-do list out of here, and basically guarantee you have systems and processes to get you towards your goals. And the quote is this from the incredible James Clear: "Goals are for people who care about winning once. Systems are for people who care about winning repeatedly." All that and more in today's episode. So without further ado, let's get into the show. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George show from a beautiful 60-degree, rainy, cloudy day in Montana. And I love these days. It's been 90 every day, which I love. It's beautiful. And we have this one day of like 60 degrees and rain. And I feel really productive today, which makes me really excited to do today's podcast because it's also going to be about productivity. And before we get into it, I'm going to ask you a question in relation to the topic today and how I've used it to benefit myself immensely. But before we do, let me just read you this quote that will frame kind of today's episode. So James Clear, the author of the incredible book Atomic Habit, wrote in his book, "Goals are for people who care about winning once. Systems are for people who care about winning repeatedly." And so that's what we're going to be talking about today on the episode. And the thing that I wanted to ask you, and I want to take a sip of water real quick. I'm a little parched because I decided I was going to go to the gym this morning. And today was hard leg day, but I didn't feel like lifting. So instead I put my weight vest on and I did 100 stairs on the Stairmaster and then walked for a couple miles and then walked backwards for like a mile and then did the sauna. So I'm really dehydrated. Not really. I'm hydrated, but I'm really thirsty because I pushed my workout this morning. But here's my question, and it's in regards to today's episode. So a lot of people have been DMing me and asking me, "George, what have you been doing? What have you been doing? What's different? You look different. You look shredded. You look happy. You like, what's going on?" Right. And yes, 1000%. I am in the best shape of my life. I am the healthiest I've ever been. I am the happiest I've ever been, the most clear. Things feel the easiest. And it really, really does feel easy now. And everybody keeps asking me how. And the answer to how is today's podcast. And the how was, I actually started taking my own medicine. I started believing in consistency around the process rather than these erratic behaviors or inconsistency around emotions or these goals that weren't really aligned or were more short-term than they were long-term. And so the reason I ask this is because I've been on Instagram a lot lately and I've been really back and forth on, do I post this? Do I not? And a lot of people like, "Hey, how have you been eating? How have you been working out? Like, how are you training? How are you doing all this?" And I have a genuine question for everybody listening to this. And I just need you to shoot me a DM on Instagram with your answer. But I need to know if you would be interested in me talking about on this podcast, on Instagram, kind of like my approach on a deeper level, knowing that our physical body is a big part of our success as an entrepreneur, and I talk about it often, but even like my philosophy on food or movement or what I'm doing and incorporating that deeper. Like we talk about mindset very deeply and like, here's how I do it. And here's my habits and rituals, and even in like the sacred Lightkeeper quadrants. But I'm just curious because I've been asking on Instagram, like I really every day, it almost feels monotonous to post because everything I'm doing is the same thing, and it's been the same thing every day pretty consistently. And I would say to about 90% completion consistently of the same things. And it's working like clockwork to the point where now I'm like getting addicted to doing it every day. And so I just want to know, I would love to hear from you if that's something you're interested in. Let me know if you want me to post it on Instagram, talk about it on the podcast, anything particular. It would be really, really helpful, right? So Now let's get back to this James Clear quote and the purpose of today's podcast, right? So this is really about everybody, irregardless of your business, where you are in your business, just tuning into this thinking level, right? One of the best things I ever heard a coach say, God, it had to be 10, 15 years ago, was, my job isn't to tell you what to think, it's to help change how you think. And I absolutely love that concept. And it really, really is powerful, because if you think about you listening to this, you have more knowledge than anybody of your business, your life, of the inside job that I will and no one else will ever know. And if we tell you a specific way to think or a specific thing to do, it's most likely not going to work because it's missing the rest of the context that we can't have. If we give you an example of how we do it, but then we break down the process of why we think that way and other ways that you can think about it, you can apply that to your situation and get the context that's needed to get it over the finish line. And I think that's a really good way to think about today's podcast. And I think for me personally, this is something that I still struggle with. And I was on a phone call yesterday with a client of mine having a similar conversation where I doubt myself all the time and I just want somebody to tell me the way or point me in that direction. But ultimately, there's this deep knowing that I know no matter what, it has to be my way. And it just really boils down to how I think, right? And so when we think about why this matters, is you set any goal, any result, right? Whether it's in your physical life, your emotional life, mental, your business, your goals. As James Clear says in Atomic Habits, goals are for people who care about winning once. Systems are for people who care about winning repeatedly. And we think about all these things that we talk about that we know are so important. Alex Sharfin calls them the core functions of your business, right? And he's a systems ninja. We call them needle movers, which I think is a term I got from Dean Graziosi and Tony Robbins. Andy Frisella, I think, calls them his core list or something like that. Like, we know what they are. I mean, really in companies, it's somebody's job description, right? The outcomes of their jobs, right? We know what these needle movers are. And our job is to build processes and systems around these needle movers and to protect them. And that process is the process that, when we follow it consistently, creates the results. Now, on paper, that sounds really, really simple. But in reality, obviously, a lot of things get in the way. But all of this has to do in the lens of growth, right? So we have our personal growth, which is us choosing to grow as a person, right? Whether that's growing in our relationship, growing in our mental thinking, in our personal development, growing our physical body, growing our emotional health, growing our spirituality, right? Whether that's applied to the business, learning a new skill set, launching a new offer, scaling the company, right? There's a lot of places where we can put growth, right? We can think about how we can grow our Instagram or how we can grow our client base and how we can grow our bottom line. In doing so, we set goals that are usually short term that allow us to feel like we have something to work towards. And that is a massive, massive benefit. And this is something that I resisted a long time ago, where I used to be like, I don't need a long-term goal. I just need the short term. But there's really a lot of truth to this, that the way to win the game is to figure out where you want to be in the future and then work backwards and start putting it into practice, right? And so at the base level, goals are a great way to create a progress line. Right? So goals become a disservice when they simply stay as a goal, though. The finish line keeps getting moved and we don't actually create a system to support it. It's like we're running the same exact race every day. We don't have to be running as hard. Maybe it's just 1 mile instead of 4 because we leaned into a system that supports the other 3 miles. So I'll give you a tangible business example. I watch people all the time, myself included, would go to create growth on my Instagram, and I would try a new strategy and I would increase my content, right? And then it would start working. But instead of slowing down to build a process around it and then bring in a team member or simplify the process, I would just try to do more of it. And then eventually what would happen, I would burn out. And then when I burnt out, I would resist it, not do it anymore. And then I would go on to a new idea. And that is like a really, really simple way to see how, when I just set the goal of building it and I stayed so focused on it, that eventually there was collateral damage or noise from around me that got in the way. But if at any point in that I had paused and I'd built a system around it, or realized I was doing the same behavior multiple times, or realized that it was getting in the way of one of my needle movers, we could have adjusted and made an adjustment, which, this has probably happened thousands and thousands of times. But the more proactively we go about it and the more aware of it we are, the better we have a chance of mitigating it, right? So the really solution comes down to how do you build systems to win repeatedly? Well, the first step every single time is you have to get crystal clear on what winning is, right? What is winning for you, right? And for me, if I had to answer this question in the lens of how, the first lens would be you have to get clear on your vision, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to know exactly what it looks like, but you have to have an idea so you can move in that direction, right? I like calling it a fuzzy vision or fuzzy goals. So you would go read Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold, right? That would be kind of part one. Part two is you would set some parameter, baseline, measure, or metric as a measurement, right? It could be a revenue goal. It could be a sales goal. It could be anything that you decide to set, right? And you would set that goal. And then at that goal, you would dissect it down into what functions would start creating that goal. Simultaneously, you would dissect what you would need to do as a person to be able to do that workout, grow as a person, and do that goal. And if you think about both of those would come down to be your needle movers, right? So to find those, you would read a book like Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz after you read The Pumpkin Plan, which is how to make a business, right? Or you would read any book on time management, delegations, and core functions. Another one by Mike Michalowicz is Fix This Next. And the reason I always reference the same authors is because they literally wrote it better than anybody. And it's so simple and so easy. And it's just a matter of reading it and putting it into practice. So this is more so getting a hyper awareness of where you want to go, right? And then getting crystal clear of the things that are going to get you there. And once you have those, really protecting your not to-dos more than those to-dos. And what do I mean by that? Meaning, when you've identified that those are your core functions. So for example, in the last, I'd say since January of this year, so let's call it 8 months, right? 9 months, because we're in September, I've lost about 60 pounds. And in that process, really the simplistic way to look at it, what's worked the most, has been 30 minutes of walking every morning before I do anything else fasted, hitting my water goals and my sleep goals, and then I hit a protein goal every day. And I measure my calories, I hit my 170 grams of protein, and then I fill in the rest, and I kind of intuitively eat, right? And so when I set that out, I set that down as my workout, irregardless of anything else. If I could work out more, I would. If I had to make an adjustment, I would. But my job, that workout basically guaranteed that it would get me where I wanted to go. And here I am now, 9 months later, and it literally feels effortless. And I've lost and gained weight probably 8 or 9 times at a significant level, but it always required some small goal or something to spark it, or some crazy energy. And it was always this really insecure, intense. And this time it's really crazy. It's not. I don't have any of that. I've done a lot of walking outside. I've done a lot of body weight stuff. Sometimes I go to the gym. Sometimes I don't work out for 5 days in a row. And it's really because I built the system to protect the goal. And then when things got in the way, if I had a travel delay, I would still just hit my steps and not worry about the workout. I'd get my protein and not worry about the rest. I'd make sure I drank my water and I slept, and I did that consistently. And if I missed a day because something happened, I would just get back on it tomorrow. And by getting back on it, it was easy because it was really identifiable and I protected it. And what I meant by that is that I couldn't work or do anything else for the day until I hit those core behaviors. So by identifying these things, what we do is we recognize the power of the core functions of our business and what we really need to be focusing our energy on. This also applies to your personal goals and recognizing the power of the core functions that are going to get you closer towards that goal or vision, and then focusing on them and how to create sustainable goals that move the needle forward, right? And in the lens of business, this is typically really easy to identify, right? I always say to people, if I was to take you out of your business and put you in my seat and then put me in your seat, and I came to you and I said, hey, I can't figure out how I made revenue in the last 6 months. I said, would you be able to help me figure out the 3 to 5 activities that generated 80% of the revenue? And they're like, yeah, of course I could. I'm like, awesome. Those are our needle movers. Those are our core functions, right? And so when we think about core functions, Ashley wrote out this analogy that I really, really love, and I couldn't think of a better one, but we want to think about it like this. So think about building a house. Let's say you're building a house. You can put up 4 walls, but until you put the roof on top to connect it all together, all you have is 4 walls and not yet a house. The system is the roof that keeps all 4 walls together, right? She made a note. She's like, you may be able to think of a better analogy. I really can't. I mean, another one would be like your core needle movers, right? Like your core habits, both in your business and personal, like the race car, right? And then the system is the seatbelt that puts you in the driver's seat with the keys, right? And that's to protect those behaviors. Because when you think about a system, what a system does is it identifies from a really clear state what is going to be effective, and then it puts it into practice. So irregardless of what happens, it protects that process, knowing that it's going to work. And so that's what a system does. And so if you want to be able to operate consistently in this game of entrepreneurship or in this game of life and be able to weather the storms, it's always going to be systems, right? And I saw this clip from Mel Robbins that Ashley sent to me on Instagram, and I'm going to do an entire podcast on it. But to summarize it down, it was really like how to get unstuck. And she was helping her daughter get unstuck. And you know, her daughter was convinced that she didn't know how to be happy. And she had to draw a line on her paper. And she said, think about a time when you were happy. And she's like, all right, on the left side of the line, write down what you did day to day. And she's like, oh, I got up at 7:30 and I left the house. I went and did this. I went and did that. I went and did that. Right. And really, when it was on paper, you asked the question of like, okay, if you did these things, would you be happy? And the question is yes, or the answer is yes, or doing them consistently would create happiness. So we do know, but things get in the way. And what a system does is allows us to put that into practice and protect it, right? And James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, is one of the best books ever talking about consistency and momentum to build those simple systems around your core needle movers, both in your business, but also in your personal life, to work on you as a person that's applying those into the business. That's where you're going to be able to weather the storms. And so your needle movers are the things that you'll fall back onto or protect or start working around whenever anything gets broken or when anything needs a facelift or when anything that changes. It's kind of like you go back into the kitchen and you're like, all right, cool. The menu is kind of working, but there's a few things not. Let's audit it. Let's taste test it. All right, let's get back to the basics and let's figure out where to go from here. But it's always going to be around those systems. And I'm going to say that, like, as an entrepreneur, I resisted this: goals, long-term strategies, systems, even clarity on who I wanted to be in the future, till probably about 3 years ago. And my dirty little secret is because I didn't actually think I'd ever be able to do it. So I never allowed myself to dream about it or to envision it. And, you know, there's some deep things underneath there. But now that I get it, it makes so much sense. And every day feels like celebratory because I can almost feel and see every bite that's taken that gets me one step closer every day. And so our systems are the part that puts this into practice. And like, as simply put, is like, if you say that you want to lose 30 pounds in the next 6 months, and you identify and map out a plan that's relatively easy, that makes you move your body for 30 minutes a day, focus on your sleep, and eat a couple things, that takes less than 30 minutes a day, we all know it's physically possible. And then the moment you take that and you commit that publicly to a trainer, to your family, to people on the internet, and then you like put it in your calendar and make that commitment with yourself to, like, no matter how I feel, I'm going to do this. That's kind of a system that's put into place to hold you accountable to those behaviors and actions, irregardless of how you feel, so that you can get closer to that goal. And so it works no matter where we put it, but we have to be the ones that are doing it. Because if all we're doing is setting these short-term goals, we can be running 75 independent races that all have nothing to do with each other or in opposite directions of where we think we want to be going or where we potentially might want to go. So the systems that you build in your business are the structure that many, many people crave. And like, I read Jocko's book, Discipline Equals Freedom. I've read all of them. And I was even in the Marine Corps for 13 years and lived in an environment that we thrived because of the structure. And yet I still had a challenge in moving it over into business. But now that I get it, now that I have it, it really, really is the path to freedom. Because the more discipline we have around protecting those things that move the needle in the business and move the needle in our life, the faster we have the ability to get it done every day and then enjoy the fruits of that labor, or go buy some more future time and get some more work done to get back into the game. And so when you get into this, like, how is this done deeper than what I said earlier? Well, you have to identify the core functions of your business, right? And if you look on paper objectively enough from a 30,000 foot view and you've ever made money in your business, you can backlog and backtrace how that money came in. What were your behaviors? What were you doing? Like, I know for me, without me creating content every week, whether that's going on interviews or on podcasts or calls or this podcast, like, my business doesn't exist. Without me constantly consuming and trying things around customer journey, I can't create models that I can use to teach and help other people buy back their time in their business by building relationships with customers. And so, like, even without those two things, I don't exist. And so no matter how bad my days are, no matter how bad my weeks are, our systems in our team are put into practice with my schedule and my personal life taken into advance to make sure that all those podcasts and those calls are hit, no matter what else is going on. And that's what really creates the safety net and gives us the ability to operate inside of it. But only you can build that, right? And then when you build those, what you're doing is you're protecting them, right? And so when you identify them, they become the priority, right? And so we do this exercise where we make people identify their needle movers, right? What are your 3 core needle movers every day? Then we make you open your calendar, schedule them in, and commit to them publicly. And then you can't do anything else in your world until those are done and those are blocked off. And you have to, like, earn the right to be distracted. And so you have to prioritize these things. And so that comes down to you and how you implement these things into your life and into your business. And the more intentional you are and the more structured you are about it now, and then the more consistently you follow it, irregardless of how you feel, the faster you'll get to that result, whatever that result is, or the faster you'll get through that storm, whatever that storm is that you're weathering, where consistency around those core functions are the safety net. They're the keel in the water. They're the things that ground you and bring you back. And so Ashley does this as well. And she created an entirely separate task list for her needle movers and core functions. So what she does is she has 2 lists in her world of how she manages her tasks. And one of them is her core functions in our business. And so that is like the thing that is done every single day before she opens up the other board, which has the parking lot and the other items that are done there. And so that way she's protected by earning that one first before she dives into any other projects or distractions, right? And so this boils down to what structure, what workout, what routine do you want to put into place? And so ask yourself, like, if I was hiring a personal trainer for my business, what would they be doing to hold me accountable? What would be my distractions? And find them. And then build in solutions in your support system. Hire a coach, call me, rebuild your inner circle, come to one of the events, meet some, co-working partners, like, build a way to get yourself into the game, and then go fall in love with the process so that you can get the result. And so that's how I'm going to wrap today's episode, because I feel like I need to go chug 64 ounces of water. And so that's what we have today. So if you haven't, I highly recommend you go read Atomic Habits by James Clear. It is an annual reread for sure. And I mean this. I ask all the time, and I love those of you that DM me. It's always the same 15 or 20 of you from the podcast who DM me when I ask questions. I'm looking you directly in the eye if you're watching this on video, to please, it means the world to me, to respond and let me know to my questions earlier, because it helps me. And I really get sad when I ask and nobody responds. And I'm like, does anybody even listen? Because I don't look at the downloads. But I'm like, please send me a DM. I put so much energy into this podcast. Just give me like 1 minute. So please DM me. I really, really want it. And I'm a words of affirmation guy. And I love all of you. And I really do mean it when I ask for you to respond. And it helps me. I am in this with you. I am on your team. I am a part of the game. Just please make sure you include me. Okay, I'm going to go cry now. I'm going to go do some breath work. and I'm going to go drink some water. You're going to go put this into practice, go reread Atomic Habits, build a system around your needle movers, and go create some massive results so we can come party in Montana or wherever else we decide to go. And you're going to have an incredible day because I appreciate you, because I love you, and relationships will always beat algorithms. So you'll either see me in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, it's time for the outro and for you to grab an event ticket if you haven't already. So go to mindofgeorge.com/event. And now here's the outro.